Good morning. I'm Jeff Hammond, Executive Director at International Ground Source Heat Pump Association. Thank you so much for joining us for our October Town Hall. We're thrilled to have Dr. Alexis McKittrick as our speaker, and her organization, the U.S. Department of Energy, the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Department, as our sponsor. So thank you very much, DOE and Dr. McKittrick, for joining us this morning. We're excited to go through that presentation. Before we get to Dr. McKittrick, I have just a few updates, the latest IGSHPA news to go through, and then we'll introduce Alexis and move over to her presentation. We're nearing the end of the year, so we need to be thinking about 2024 Town Hall and Dig Deeper webinars. If you're interested in presenting, just contact us at the info account at IGSHPA.org. We are accepting abstracts for 2024, both the Town Hall and the Dig Deeper webinars, and we're also looking for sponsors for next year's webinars. So let us know if that's something you're interested in. Sponsorships are great because your logo stays on forever, technically. We record these sessions, and so anytime anyone looks at that webinar, your logo is on the intro and the last slide. Just a reminder on the conference, we're coming up to the early bird special pricing ending here shortly, less than a month. And so prices go up at the beginning of November. So you'll want to make sure that you're registered if you haven't already at IGSHPA.org for the conference in December. We're partnering again with the National Groundwater Association. It's December 5th through the 7th in Las Vegas at the Convention Center. Really expecting some good turnout this year. We have just a great list of presenters, and we have some excellent sponsors. We certainly could not do the conference without the support of our sponsors. We've filled all of the sponsorships already this year, and we have some additional sponsors for our lanyards, Celsius Energy, and for Tuesday's breakfast, the Gray Edge Group. So thank you very much to all of our sponsors. It certainly makes this conference possible. We have some exhibit space left. You can see it's filling up quickly. If you'd like to exhibit at the conference, you still have time. Go to the IGSHPA.org website for details on reserving a booth. You can see here that we have a number of 10 by 10 booths open, and those can be combined into 10 by 20 or 20 by 20 booths if desired. Great location. The doors are right over here on the right-hand side and also over to the right of that. So it's a great location for visibility. The agenda is online at IGSHPA.org. You'll find 11 tracks, 49 workshops, our annual general meeting, as well as the leadership address, welcome reception on Tuesday night. And we have a full day of joint workshops with the NGWA. We're thrilled to have Alejandro Moreno, the Associate Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, EERE, at the DOE. He will be our keynote speaker, and we'll be able to provide all the latest information from DOE. So you won't want to miss that. Also note that you'll see in your inbox an email about the IGSHPA Board of Directors election. It starts next Monday. If you'd like to check out the candidates, go to the website. Under the About menu, you'll find a menu choice Board of Directors. And if you click on that, there's a button that will take you to the candidates for this upcoming election. The board's expanding from 5 to 7 with our 2 new sectors. We have a manufacturer sector and a utility sector that brings our board to 7. And the new board members will be announced at the annual general meeting in Vegas. You'll want to note that only IGSHPA members can vote. If you haven't renewed your membership or you'd like to join us as a new member, we'd love to have you. And that's one of the benefits of being a member, is being able to vote in IGSHPA elections. Our research conference is coming up in 2024. We have closed submissions on October 9th. I'm sure if you still have a submission, we can probably squeeze it in if it's received by the end of the week. And then we'll start notifying authors October 18th, and papers will be due shortly after that. It's in Montreal, Canada in May of next year, and I think we'll have some great topics for that research conference. We're partnering with Polytechnique Montreal on that conference. If you haven't checked out our new website, IGSHPA.org, hopefully you'll find it easier to use. The menus are much friendlier. and it continues to evolve. So you'll see changes as we go. Hopefully you saw the Geo Outlook magazine. It was in your inbox in September. That was our first digital edition since 2019. We're going to a January and July issue for next year. Hopefully, eventually that will go back to a quarterly magazine. If you'd like to submit an article or advertise in Geo Outlook, let us know. Now's the time for January, certainly, but also if you're thinking about submitting an article, we're already looking at July for that issue as well. So let us know if that's something you're interested in. We'd love to have advertisers. This is a digital edition, and it gets sent to engineered services and the news BNP media audience. So it's quite a large audience for this magazine. If you'd like CEUs for your certification renewals, this town hall and our Dig Deeper webinars are eligible. If you would, please submit your name and your email in the chat, and we'll keep track of those CEUs for you. There's also a new option. If you're watching this recorded webinar, all you have to do is provide this code later on. If you're attending live, don't worry about this. But if this is you're watching this recorded webinar video, then you'll be able to receive CEUs as well with that webinar code. Just some housekeeping, if you would, add all your questions in the chat, and I will read those at the end of Alexis's presentation. If we don't get to your message today, we'll do our best to get back to you just as soon as possible. Just for courtesy of attendees, please mute your microphone unless you're speaking. And as I mentioned, we will be recording this session for viewing later on. We'll have that on the website in the next couple of days. Just go to the IGSHPA.org website and you'll find that under publications. Quick disclaimer, and then we'll be able to move on to our presentation. The upcoming presentation represents the opinion of the presenter and does not represent any official position, opinion, or endorsement of any products or services by IGSHPA or its members. IGSHPA town halls and Dig Deeper webinars are for member updates and education on the latest information in the geothermal heat pump industry and are not meant to endorse one technology or brand over another. It is the presenter's responsibility to disclose any conflict of interest or position that may arise in the content of the webinar. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Alexis McKittrick as our speaker, and thanks again to EERE DOE for sponsoring this webinar. We certainly appreciate it. Dr. Alexis McKittrick is a program manager with the U.S. Department of Energy's Geothermal Technologies Office, overseeing both the low temperature and co-produced resources and hydrothermal resources research portfolios. In this role, she leads a team that supports research development and demonstrates across a range of geothermal technology platforms, including district heating and cooling systems, ground source heat pumps, thermal energy storage, hydrothermal power production, advanced drilling technologies, and extraction of critical minerals from geothermal fluids. Prior to joining DOE in April 2020, Dr. McKittrick was a senior researcher at the IDA Science and Technology Policy Institute, where she worked with the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Dr. McKittrick also has prior experience in the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, Climate Division. She has a BS in Chemical Engineering from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and a PhD in Chemical Engineering from Georgia Institute of Technology. It's my pleasure to turn this over to you, Dr. McKittrick. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jeff, for that kind introduction. And I really appreciate the thoughtful bio. I'm going to ask that everyone call me Alexis, please, for the duration of the webinar today. So hello again, Alexis McKittrick from the Department of Energy. I am really excited for this webinar today. It came out of actually last year's IGSHPA conference, where I was having a hallway conversation with a number of folks about the areas of DOE that might have interesting funding opportunities or interesting topics that would be relevant to the heat pump industry, and recognize that a lot of folks within IGSHPA and members of IGSHPA are largely familiar with DOE's Geothermal Technologies Office and maybe not as much with the rest of the agency. In addition, since IGSHPA is understandably more focused on the heat pump space and on geothermal heating and cooling, there was less understanding as well of some of the power focus work that DOE GTO does and kind of how our budget is divided up and how our work is divided up. So this presentation on navigating the U.S. Department of Energy is really aimed at demystifying kind of all of that. And so as we go through, it's kind of divided in half. I would say the first half is really focused on DOE's Geothermal Technologies Office, where I work, and I think where a lot of stakeholders on the call today, on the webinar today, interact. And then the second half is really focused on other parts of DOE. We're kind of mapping out the large organization that DOE is and where are some other corners of that organization where folks within the IGSHPA community may want to start to look and pay attention to. So again, really appreciate the time today and the space to walk through this. So again, as promised, I'm going to start out with DOE's Geothermal Technologies Office and kind of how we think about the geothermal energy space. And this is a basic graphic that we often use. This, as the thermometer graphic suggests, is really focused on temperature. So we largely divide our work and how we think about geothermal energy in kind of three different temperature profiles. I'm actually going to start at the bottom, the one that's probably most familiar to folks on the phone, right? Our heating and cooling space, shallower geothermal systems. This include things like ground source heat pumps or geothermal heat pumps, district and community systems that are, again, more on the shallower and heating and cooling focused scale, as well as commercial applications for the same. And then as we move into the medium temperatures, we're really talking about more direct use heating. We're looking at potentially underground or reservoir thermal energy storage applications in this 80 to 300F range, as well as larger industrial applications like agriculture, like manufacturing and industry applications in some cases. You'll see a lot of these examples I'm giving sort of articulated in this thermometer graphic on the side here. And then as we get above 300F, that's really when we're talking about using geothermal resources to generate power, typically through geothermal power plants. And here we have examples of both binary and flash and dry steam geothermal power plants. I'm not going to go through the differences between the types of geothermal power plants on this webinar today, but always happy to have a follow-up conversation with folks on that for those who are interested. And then this also just gives a couple of examples, both within the power generation and the direct use space, the geothermal, kind of dividing that up as well. So again, a nice visual to kind of get us started off and centered. Another piece I wanted to make sure to focus on before jumping into the different sub-programs within GTO and how we divide up work is that we do have a 5-year strategy for our office and kind of the different work that the Geothermal Technologies Office is focusing on. And that's called our multi-year program plan. And many offices within DOE have multi-year program plans. They typically are 5 years, though sometimes they can be on the decadal time frame as well. And our multi-year program plan was issued in 2022, and as the graphic shows, runs through 2026, and really has 3 different overarching goals. One, electricity focus, right, providing that electric generation for a carbon-free grid. 2 is heating and cooling focus, so decarbonizing the U.S. building stock through heat pumps, through district heating and cooling and direct use systems. And then 3rd is a kind of cross-cutting goal focus on how can we think through how our funding opportunities, our programs, our initiative are delivering on reducing costs to the American consumer, making sure that environmental benefits and environmental justice are taken into account as we're thinking through our programs and essentially how can we reduce burdens, particularly on those that disproportionately feel them. Essentially, how can we ensure for the first two goals that the decarbonization of the U.S. building stock and carbon-free electric grid are accessible to everyone. And then if you do Google or find on our website our multi-year program plan, you'll see that it has 6 overall categories of work associated with it. So as we are charting out our multi-year program plan, what our goals are for each year between 2022 and 2026, we generally put them into these 6 categories. The first one is exploration and characterization, and is really focused on how are we understanding the subsurface, how are we identifying geothermal resources, what new methods are out there to help us really target in particular hidden geothermal systems that may be able to generate power, but honestly understanding geochemistry and geology of the subsurface writ large. The second, on accessing the resource, is really about drilling improvements. So this is looking to improve downhole tools, particularly for wells that are going, thousands and in some cases over 10,000 feet into the subsurface. Those very hot environments, you saw over 300 F for power generating applications. How are we creating and nurturing R&D in a space that can withstand high temperature, caustic, hard rock environments, that you don't see in other industries like oil and gas that also do this kind of deep drilling. And then how can we actually improve the rate of penetration to be able to drill better, faster, stronger, as I like to say. And then subsurface enhancement and sustainability is really about how in geothermal power you're managing your reservoir. This is largely focused in our enhanced geothermal systems subprogram, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. But it is really all about understanding the subsurface reservoir, how it might change over time, how you can manage it and sustain it over time in order to be able to have that longest amount of life possible. And then resource maximization is the key area where we focus our heating and cooling work. So this is where goals related to ground source heat pumps can be found, goals related to how geothermal is being valued and maximizing that value towards the grid, and also how we can think about other value streams, like incorporating thermal energy storage, like lithium extraction from geothermal brines, which has become a very hot topic in the geothermal energy world and the mineral world recently. That's all included in resource maximization. And then data modeling and analysis is very cross-cutting. It is focusing on, as the name suggests, what data is needed across all geothermal spaces. How do we fill that gap with data collection and curation? How are we conducting and where, in what spaces are we conducting analyses that are needed in order to tell that value story for geothermal and make sure that we're understanding the impact that geothermal can have on communities, on the grid, on the world around us in service of those goals on the previous slide. And then there's also a whole portfolio of non-technical barriers work that's in the DMA space. Policy and regulatory analysis, in particular, permitting for geothermal energy is a regular topic within this particular category. And then we also have a category on geothermal integration and awareness. So this is, I would say, 2 different pieces of this. One is how are we thinking about geothermal in the context of other technologies, such as advanced manufacturing, and how are we making a connection with things like hydrogen production as we're thinking through how geothermal energy needs to develop in the next 5 years. And then this is also about stakeholder engagement and communication. So we talk a lot, I know this community within IGSHPA talks a lot about how can we better communicate and better tell the story around ground source heat pumps and the benefits that they bring everywhere that they're installed. And so this is really focused on that communication and outreach and how to improve that space. Great. keep going here. So that was our NYPP and kind of the 6 cross-cutting areas that we work in. I'm now going to shift a little bit more to kind of how we're organized as a department. So within the Geothermal Technologies Office, we have 4 different technical sub-programs, and you'll notice some alignment with the categories on the previous slide. Not shown here, I should mention, we also have an operations pillar as well that has our communications group, our budget focus group, those that are helping us get funding out the door and helping us essentially manage the work and the operations of the group. So they are a critical part, if a non-technical part, of the organization. And so I wanted to make sure to call them out, even though they're not shown here. Shown here are the 4 different technical sub-programs within GTO. So whenever you hear us say the word sub-program, these are the kind of things these are the different parts of the organization that we're talking about. And I actually have one slide that covers each of them, so I'm going to go ahead and flip through quickly, but just wanted to show them all on one slide to kind of give folks a sense of how we're divided as an organization. So first we have the data modeling and analysis program, and this is currently managed by Sean Horse in our office. And as discussed as part of the NYPP, again, really focused on non-technical barriers, supporting policy development in an interagency way, right? So DOE doesn't issue permits in particular, but we do have the opportunity to interact with our counterparts in the Department of Interior, to interact across different spaces, like with the Department of Defense. Folks may have read about their recent interest, engagement, and announcements around geothermal energy development, which are really exciting. So that's work that we can kind of do across the federal government as well as part of this non-technical barrier work. And then DMA also works a lot with NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, on analysis and valuation of geothermal. And while this had historically focused more on geothermal power, I will say there's been a concerted effort within the past few years to increase the amount of analysis related to ground source heat pumps in particular, and the systems that they serve, so the larger geothermal heating and cooling space. And so we're really excited to start talking about some of that analysis and work. And I know, Jeff, that is a subject for a future, I believe it's a Dig Deeper webinar here coming through in a couple months. So keep an eye out for some of that really exciting analysis. And then next, the Hydrothermal Resources Program. So I manage this sub-program, and this program is largely focused on geothermal power production and the RD&D needed to reduce costs and reduce risks associated with geothermal power development. So again, we have a good amount of geothermal power plants that exist in the U.S. West now. And we often get the question of, like, is this a commercial technology? Absolutely. It is a commercial technology, but it is one that can absolutely benefit from additional RD&D that's going to help, again, with that exploration and characterization piece, drilling advancements piece, which is going to help with reduce the costs associated with drilling and developing geothermal power, but also reduce that risk. If we can improve drilling, if we can better target our resource, then the risk goes down dramatically for producers in this space. And and I also just wanted to mention that hydrothermal resources in particular are kind of characterized by 3 things. So this is where you have the fluid, the temperature, and the permeability within the subsurface naturally occurring to generate power at the surface. So we'll talk about EGS in a minute, which is when we are essentially manufacturing geothermal conditions or engineering geothermal conditions in the subsurface. Hydrothermal resources are places and spaces in the U.S. where we already have that permeability, fluid, and heat at depth, such that you can bring that hot fluid to the surface and use it to generate power at the surface. Great. Going here. And here we are in Enhanced Geothermal Systems, and this program is currently managed by Kevin Jones. And this is, again, looking at places where we do have appropriate temperature at depth, but might not have the fluid or the permeability needed to generate power at the surface. So in this case, we're actually using water to stimulate fractures and introduce additional fluid into the subsurface in a way that you can create, essentially, or engineer a reservoir for geothermal power making conditions. So this is an area where there's a lot of advancement right now. Folks may have seen the exciting announcement from Fervo from, gosh, I think it was a month-ish ago at this point. But this has been a space of R&D and demonstration for the last couple of decades, and now we're starting to see really exciting advancements in this space that may open up a whole new, a broad range of areas for geothermal. If anywhere that there's temperature at depth, we can engineer a reservoir that enables us to create really baseload power production in a way that you can't get from intermittent sources like wind or solar. All right, and then I saved the best for last here. The one I think of most historic interest to the IGSHPA community is our low temperature and co-produced resources program. And again, I manage this sub-program as well, and this is really focused on research, development, demonstration, and I would say deployments of technologies that are in this ground source heat pump or geothermal heat pump space for every scale from individual residences and individual commercial buildings all the way up to campus scale, community scale, district scale heating or heating and cooling systems. And then this also includes our portfolio of subsurface thermal energy storage work as well. So again, a lot packed into this kind of broader heating and cooling portfolio, but a really exciting space. All right, so now the budget numbers, right? You can't have a federal government presentation without a little bit on enacted budget and appropriations. So this just shows from kind of FY 2015 all the way through projections for FY 24 or congressional budget requests, I should say, for FY 24, what the GTO overall budget has looked like over time. And so you can see that we have seen increases over time, and in fact, about a doubling of our budget between FY 2015 and FY 2020, so about a 5-year span there. And then since FY 2020, it's been relatively flat. What you see in green is the actual budget that the enacted budget that Congress appropriates to us. I know one question that came up during discussion at last year's IGSHPA conference was kind of trying to understand why GTO didn't just kind of, or DOE didn't just kind of decide to spend more funding on ground source heat pumps. And this is a short version of the answer, which is that our budget for our office is appropriated by Congress. And then we end up kind of taking for FY23, in this case, 118 million, and kind of dividing it across the 4 different sub-programs that are shown. And so you can see, I'm not sure if folks can see my cursor or not, but you can see that for this FY 2023 total of 118 million, if we go back up to this table here, this shows the breakdown for this fiscal year that just finished of how much we're spending in each of these different sub-programs on for FY23 specifically. For FY24, folks may know from watching the news, Congress has not appropriated a full year budget yet. We currently are in what's called a continuing resolution, which is essentially when a fractional budget or a budget that lasts for a certain period of time is passed, and usually it is passed as a flat budget from the prior year. I believe we're in a 45-day continuing resolution now, and so the idea is when there is a full year budget passed, that is really the moment in time when we know for certain within GTO what our budget for this next fiscal year will be. The 216 million number, while very exciting, I need to point out, is our congressional budget justification, which is essentially when the executive branch sends over to the legislative branch, hey, this is what we would like, what we're interested in from a funding perspective for each agency and even down to each individual office. So 216 is how much we've requested from the congressional appropriators, but we won't know until we get that full year budget what it looks like. I will say that historically, whether we've asked for a amount much lower than our previous budgets or much higher, as you can see from the trend line, we typically have either gotten small increases or kind of a flat budget year over year. So again, we'll see if that trend line holds as we go into FY24 and hopefully move towards a full year budget. And then one other note, again, a really common question that we get is, how does GTO issue funding? So a lot of folks come in and say, hey, I'd just like to come pitch you an idea and see if you're interested in funding it. Well, we're always excited to hear from stakeholders and understand new technology that's out there. We do have to competitively solicit funding opportunities. So typically what we do is issue what is called funding opportunity announcements, or FOAs. Excuse me, sure that clicks backwards. Funding opportunity announcements, and those will be topical and say specifically we are issued in funding this particular technical space. I think the community geothermal funding opportunity that closed last October is one that's probably familiar to a lot of folks on the call here. So that's a good example when we said we're interested in funding community geothermal projects. Here's some specifics around what we're looking for in applications. Here's the goals of the FOA, what we'd be looking for teams to do, what we can do to submit, and then submitting as part of that competition is how funding is ultimately awarded. And there's also some other types of ways that we fund money or send out funding. And I would say that one I'll highlight for folks is the Small Business Innovation Research Program. DOE has a mandate to spend a certain percentage of its R&D dollars on small business research. And so the SBIR program is one that comes out in the fall, typically of every year, with different topics related to all different kinds of technologies within DOE, geothermal just being one of them, that then small businesses can apply for funding in those different areas. So if you're a small business on the phone, I encourage you to Google SBIR DOE and look up, I'm sure it will pop up the different deadlines and kind of when we expect the next round of funding and funding announcements to be available in that space. Again, that is a broader DOE program, so not one that DOE GTO runs, but that we do have the opportunity to fund individual geothermal projects as part of. And then finally, if you're wondering, how do I know when geothermal funding opportunities come out? Well, we have a fantastic newsletter put together by our amazing communications team called The Drill Down. And if you just go to energy.gov/BERE/geothermal/drill down, then you'll be able to find a link to sign up on that for that. Also, if you just Google DOE GTO, then the Geothermal Technologies Office homepage should come up, and then you'll be able to navigate to the drill down and to sign up for it from there. And whenever we have new funding opportunities come out, whenever we have selections to announce from previous funding opportunities, so who's receiving funding for a given award, or any other big announcements, they all come out through the drill down. So I encourage everybody to keep an eye on that. And then we are, or I should say we have been developing for the last year or two, quick guides to help folks who might be new to funding opportunity announcements or FOAs, or even if you applied to one before, if you feel like, hey, I'd really like to understand kind of at a quick high level, what is the process for applying to this opportunity. This is, again, meant to demystify the FOA application process, which can have a lot of checkboxes, a lot of forms, a lot of pieces of the application. And we certainly get that at DOE and get the burden that goes along with submitting an application. And so this is meant to kind of help folks understand from the start what the major pieces will be to an application process, and also just verifying that they're eligible, because certainly we don't want stakeholders to spend time and effort pulling together an application if it turns out as they get to the final page of the FOA, they realize that maybe that their organization organization is eligible for it. So again, this is an example from the community geothermal funding opportunity from last year. And then we also have an example here from SCEP, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. It's one of our other offices. So please keep an eye out for those. And again, hopefully they really help with this kind of demystification of this overall funding process. All right, so now I'm going to move into kind of phase 2 of this presentation, which is beyond GTO, so beyond the Geothermal Technologies Office. So this is a little bit of an eye chart, and honestly, it could be more of an eye chart. This is a very high level view of the Department of Energy. And so as you can see, we have a lot of different offices, we have a lot of different spaces and places across the department. From my personal experience, this is just Alexis's personal perspective. I think other than the Department of Defense, DOE may be the largest kind of sprawling infrastructure of offices within the US federal government. DOD still has a speed of that department though. And so again, overall, again, just to kind of zoom out completely, the overall DOE mission is we're ensuring America's security and prosperity by addressing energy, environmental, and nuclear challenges through transformative science and technology solutions. So I think even looking at that statement, you can see places like energy and environmental where ground source heat pumps are going to play a large role, right, in supporting that mission. And then in other parts of DOE, like nuclear, that may not have any intersections with this industry. But again, we have a very large mission and are excited to take it on. I'm just going to walk through this again really quickly, and we'll highlight the green circles here. So we start with the Office of the Secretary. Of course, our current Secretary is Jennifer Granholm. For those who have heard DOE kind of code for these positions, her position is S1. So if you ever hear somebody say S1 is coming, or I'm looking forward to that S1 webinar, S1 is the short code for how DOE employees refer to the Secretary. And then the Deputy Secretary, David Turk, is known as S2, unsurprisingly. And then you can see as we go into these various undersecretaries that where all of this different work in DOE rolls up to them, we have S3, S4, and S5. And so S3 is actually a new position and a new organization that was stood up just several years ago when the bipartisan infrastructure law passed. So once DOE received billions of dollars from the infrastructure law, enabling us to move forward on a lot of demonstration and community-focused projects, we stood up different offices under this new undersecretary or undersecretary for infrastructure, that would support all of that work, or I should say a vast majority of that work. There are some specific bill programs like the EGS demos that were in bill that have landed in GTO, like hydrogen hubs that are still focused on our hydrogen and fuel cells technologies office. So there's a couple of exceptions, but by and large, most of the bipartisan infrastructure funding is now focused in this S3 pillar. And then we have the Undersecretary for Science and Innovation, or S4. And this is where DERE sits. So you heard Jeff say at the beginning that this town hall is brought to you by DERE's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. Well, this is EERE as one of many offices that sit under the Undersecretary for Science and Innovation. And even within ERE, we have principals that are the leaders for our entire ERE organization. We have several different pillars within ERE. GTO is in the renewable energy pillar, perhaps unsurprisingly, with wind, water, and solar offices. So there's a lot to be excited about here, and there's a lot of different places here, but you can see how it would get confusing really quickly. So these areas with the green circles, I would say, are here because those are the different places and spaces that I'm going to highlight as I go through the second half of this presentation. We're going to talk about a couple of other offices other than GTO within ERE that you all should be thinking about. And then we're also going to take a tour of the S3 pillar in OSED, MASC, and SCEP. I didn't really focus on NNSA over here, but again, that's the branch of DOE that is in that nuclear emission space. And then over here, we have a number of support offices like general counsel, HR functions, and other overall environmental management, as well as a couple of specialty offices like ARPA-E, the Advanced Research Project Agency for Energy, that do report up specifically into the Secretary's office. But these are mostly cross-cutting off support offices off to the side here. Whew. Okay, that was a lot. Let's dive into some individual offices. So we're going to start off, as I mentioned, within EERE. And the first one that I wanted to highlight is the Building Technologies Office, or BTO. And BTO, as the name suggests, is really focused on building decarbonization. They're focused on the building codes work that DOE does, as well as equipment standards, and really thinking about like building envelopes, energy efficiency, energy savings for buildings. And as you can see from the research areas listed, this is for all different types of buildings. This is commercial, this is residential. This is also thinking about emerging technologies in this space and how can we support early stage R&D that they can hopefully translate to residential and commercial building solutions. BTO is also the space where the Better Buildings initiative is largely housed. There are a number of different offices, I will say, within a DOE that have roles in the Better Buildings group, but if you all have interacted with Better Buildings as part of your heat pump focus work, BTO is one of the main places for that as well. BTO has a number of different funding opportunities that might be applicable to ground source heat pumps kind of writ large, really any geothermal heating and cooling technology that might be applied to buildings. One example I would say from the past is the connected communities work that BTO has been funding, largely around like how to make sure we have hybridized renewable energy technologies for communities, how to make sure we're thinking about how to make them grid interactive and smart, right, and adjustable systems. So this is not focused just on heat pumps, but heat pumps could be part, right, of a larger solution that is in this connected communities portfolio. So that's just one example from the past. I know that there's been a number of BTO funding opportunities in the past that look at how do we think about technical solution space for cold climates, how do we think about the technical solution space for larger scale systems beyond individual residences. So again, a lot of potential overlap here between the current set of stakeholders within IGSHPA and BTO. And then the other ERE office I wanted to highlight is IEDO, which is the Industrial Efficiency and Decarbonization Office. So these folks, as the name suggests, focus more on industrial and manufacturing applications for decarbonization. So we're really talking more on essentially the commercial scale for ground source heat pumps and geothermal heating and cooling. But they also, again, have funding opportunities related to relating to decarbonization are a key part, as is GTO, of the industrial heat shot within DOE. So it's really thinking about what are new and different ways we can think about thermal energy storage, heating and cooling that can be used to decarbonize some of the hardest to decarbonize industries in the US. So thinking about, I guess my challenge to IGSHPA stakeholders would be to think about how can your applications be used in industrial manufacturing decarbonization purposes to serve kind of the aims and the goals of IEDO. And definitely keep an eye on this funding opportunity space as, again, they're a really active office and often come up, as the research area suggests, with kind of cross-cutting funding opportunities that might have a number of different topics and that focus on different technical spaces. So worth a look. Okay, now I'm going to jump over to that S3 pillar, that infrastructure pillar that we talked about earlier. The first of those departments I want to talk about is OSET, the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations. And again, as the name suggests, they are very focused on demonstration projects and getting their $25 billion in funding for clean energy demonstrations projects out into the world. They have a lot of different portfolios here, and while none of these say geothermal in the title, I will mention, geothermal energy storage definitely has long duration potential. Again, industrial demonstrations kind of tie back to some of the themes from the IEDO discussion we talked about, demonstrating different clean energy technologies on mine lands and in rural and remote locations. Again, the real take home here is trying to encourage folks, it just doesn't have geothermal in the title, doesn't mean it's not applicable to geothermal and to ground source heat pump based technologies. So would really encourage folks to keep an eye on this space. And we actually have a current funding opportunity that's open here. You would say, I was really hoping that this town hall would coincide with all of these offices having funding opportunities I could point folks towards. But in particular, OSED has energy improvements in rural and remote areas funding opportunity that is open now. The deadline was just extended to October 26th. So now I have a couple of weeks to get an application in if this is new to you. But it's $1 billion, billion with a B, in terms of looking at advancing replicable and scalable clean energy demonstrations and energy solutions in rural and remote areas. So again, it's broad. It's not intended to be focused on a specific technology like some of the offices within EERE do, but it can be applicable to a number of different spaces, including ground source heat pumps, and I encourage everyone to take a look at that. I'm losing my words as I'm wrapping up here. All right, so next we have MESC, the Office of Manufacturing and Supply Chains. And this infrastructure office has a number of different parts of its really large portfolio. As you can imagine, manufacturing energy supply chain, there's a lot of different themes of that from the bipartisan infrastructure law. The one that I wanted to focus on for this is that this is the space where the Defense Production Act funding that was authorized in the bipartisan infrastructure law, I believe it was $450 million altogether. I was hoping it was on this slide, was what was authorized. And that funding for heat pumps specifically associated with the Defense Production Act landed here in MESC. So again, a recent opportunity that is now closed, but I know we tried very hard to promote to this group when it was open, was $250 million to accelerate manufacturing of both ground source and air source heat pump materials, components, and systems. So this is essentially trying to ensure that as the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits are taking effect, as we're seeing the increase in heat pump deployment that we expect to with those credits within the U.S., that we're bringing up manufacturing capacity to meet that need. And so this was $250 million that was set aside for applications that were meeting that need. And those applications are currently under review. Cannot discuss the results of that or the status of the review. There's no news to share there. And unfortunately, if we have an open funding opportunity that hasn't been selected yet, we can't talk publicly about it other than to mention that it is under review now. And then finally, the Office of State and Community Energy Programs, or SCEP. Again, this is also in that S3 pillar. This is a space that's focused on state and local solutions. They have an opportunity to distribute funding based on a formula that they have within the office that is mandated by Congress to each state, and so actually state-specific funding that they can provide under their state energy program area here. And then they also can issue different funding opportunities related to community energy programs. It might be weatherization assistance. I mean, we all know about the weatherization resilience that ground source heat pump systems bring. And then here's just a couple of current open opportunities for folks to think about. Energy Futures grants that are focusing on supporting local, state, and tribal government-led partnership efforts that can advance clean energy program innovation. Again, broader topic. Geothermal is a part of that solution set. And then Communities LEAP, or Local Energy Action Program, which provides technical assistance to communities, particularly those in low-income and energy-burdened areas that are interested in advancing their clean energy development within their community. So again, a very similar aim as you all are probably hearing from as the Community Geothermal Program, but this is focused more in the technical assistance space to kind of help folks get started down that path towards a renewable energy infrastructure for their community. And then we also have a Better Buildings Peer Exchange webinar on deep retrofits. How deep can you go with the Inflation Reduction Act that SCEP is going to be hosting here actually tomorrow. Oh my gosh, tomorrow. So think about signing up for that webinar tomorrow. Goodness gracious. And with all of that as background, I'll say there's a lot of opportunities to kind of keep up to date on all of these. So we have different demonstration activity, or excuse me, we have different newsletters that work for each of these different offices. We have EERE Exchange for the EERE offices, as well as Math OSET Exchange and Infrastructure Exchange, which is where funding opportunities will be posted for the Mass and the OSET and SCEP offices. So a lot of different resources here, a lot of different opportunities to kind of keep up to date on different funding. And here's what I was looking for. This is the newsletter. So I thought this was in here somewhere. So these are the different newsletters associated with the different offices that I went through today. Again, honestly, I know you guys can't click on these links live. So just Googling DOE MESC newsletter or DOE GTO newsletter will get you there. And I'm sure that these sign up opportunities will come to the front, and I'll just leave this up as we kind of talk through any questions if we have a little time to show that this is the different social media platforms to follow the U.S. Department of Energy, to follow Secretary Granholm, as well as DOE ERE. And with that, I will thank you all for your attention. I know that was a lot to process and take in a short period of time, but I hope that it was helpful. And Jeff, I'm happy to take questions in our remaining couple of minutes.
Great. Thank you so much, Alexis. That was very informative. It's nice to know how EERE relates with the other DOE offices and BTO, GTO, all the other offices. So that's super helpful. We do have some questions, so that's great. John asks a question. New York Geo is concerned about the impact increased electrification will have on grid capacity. Full electrification grid planning without incorporating the thermal value of ground loops to reduce demand would mean building an unaffordable and wasteful generation and transmission system. It's been difficult getting traction from decision makers on this point in our cold climates. Does DOE have any documentation, white papers, or other evidence that can be used to help convince utility and regulatory decision makers of the need to invest in thermal storage / ground loops?
We do in the very near future. So help is coming, John. So I alluded earlier, our data modeling and analysis group has been very focused on thinking through the valuation of geothermal heat pumps or ground source heat pumps, and in particular have been overseeing a study that is focused on mass deployment of ground source heat pumps and like what that would look like if, say, we were able to deploy ground source heat pumps to a vast majority of the U.S. where they would be installed. And that's looking at the decarbonization benefits, that's looking at the impacts on the grid, the positive impacts on the grid, which is, I think, the genesis of your question specifically. So we unfortunately do not have that study out yet. We've been talking a lot about it. We've been getting everyone excited about it. I'm hoping that it will be out within the next month. And obviously, we'll be putting it out on the drill down or issuing a larger blast about it as soon as those results are available. because I know that the broader community is really excited and interested in having that study to rely on and to talk to when talking about the larger benefits of ground source heat pumps and ground loops.
Very good. Maybe it'll be ready by the time we have the conference and Alejandro can announce it. That would be great.
That'd be amazing.
All right. Well, Victor has a question. Victor's question is the role of DOE and GTO and how geothermal is interpreted under Section 48 investment tax credit, for example, scope of system that could be considered geothermal in quotes, and recommendations for domestic content bonus credit, which is difficult to comply with currently. So I think Victor's asking you to maybe touch base on how the IRA or other potential funding sources for geothermal are appropriated for federal projects like GSA and DOE lab projects.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm following the question. If the question is about kind of the interpretation questions around the IRA tax credits, is unfortunately not something that I can talk about. So those questions do have to go directly to Treasury, as tax incentives. You know, they're ultimately the part of the federal government that's going to oversee those. So if the question is kind of on a definitional or trying to understand where and when the tax credits apply, I'm going to refer you not only to Treasury, but I would say also to the White House guidance and fact sheets around the Inflation Reduction Act, because I know that they have issued a couple of guidance documents around those. And then Jeff, it sounded like you might have been interpreting the question a little differently than I was. Can you restate that for me?
No, I think you were interpreting it exactly as it was meant, at least from what I'm reading anyway. And there is a resource on the IGSHPA website at IGSHPA.org, plus GeoExchange. The president of GeoExchange, Ryan Dougherty, is certainly well more versed in all of this than I am, for sure. But there are resources out there. You might start with the IGSHPA website and look at that particular document, and stay tuned for updates. We do try to have an article in our monthly newsletter from GeoExchange. I know Ryan's working with Treasury and with the IRS on trying to interpret a lot of this. So I think you were right on, Alexis. I don't know that we have all the answers yet. So still a work in progress, but those are great questions. We have about 2 minutes. I don't know if anyone has any other questions or not. This was such a helpful presentation. While we're waiting, I do have a question, Alexis, if that's okay. How would we be able to help as an industry promote GTO's programs? Is there something that GSHP industry could do to help you?
Such a good question. I would say that a couple of the really common questions that DOE GTO receives are questions around costs associated with ground source heat pumps, operations, as well as kind of how those items scale with different size systems. So because this is such a dynamic and fantastic space that, as I said earlier, you all know, works everywhere from the individual residents all the way up to campus scale and city scale systems, it can be sometimes tough to talk about, but we get a lot of tough questions from our own leadership, from external stakeholders about, well, exactly how much does this cost? Exactly how much data do you have on these systems that operate? Especially right now when we have tax credits and we have the Defense Production Act, we have all this excitement. There's a lot of folks that are trying to better understand this space. So Jeff, what I would say to that is, if DOE reaches out and asks, hey, do you mind providing like some blinded cost data that's not associated with your company, or do you mind providing data associated with these different systems? Please respond to us, because know that we are asking because other folks are asking us, and we're trying to best represent kind of the current status of the industry. The one other piece I'll say quickly, I know we have to finish up, is I've heard a lot about concerns around workforce related to the ground source heat pump industry, everything from drillers all the way to HVAC professionals, pipe fitters and union workers. Please, keep talking about those, because I think that that's another space that if we don't have the workforce to support as these systems really take off in the way that we're excited they will, in terms of number of deployments, that we don't want to have those two ends kind of not be able to meet as we go forward in time. So I would say keep flagging those, and to the extent that you have additional background and ideas on how to solve that issue around the future workforce, please bring them to our attention. We're all ears.
That's great advice, and definitely something we need to work on. Well, I certainly appreciate your time, Alexis. This was a wonderful presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on our monthly town hall. This will be recorded, or is being recorded, rather, and will be on the website in the next couple of days. Just go to IGSHPA.org and you'll be able to view the presentation again. Thank you for DOE sponsoring this webinar, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.